Steelers Nation, something happened on that field that refuses to leave anyone's memory. You watch a player every week, you see the potential, you hear the coaches talk about development, and then suddenly the guy steps onto the field and delivers the kind of moment that flips a switch for the entire fan base. That was the feeling around Darnell Washington after what he pulled off against Cincinnati. 4 catches and 67 yards tell only the shallowest part of the story, because what really shook everybody wasn't the box score, it was the way he moved, the way he threw defenders aside like they were nothing more than accidental obstacles, the way he made that 31-yard burst look like a mismatch you'd expect in a completely different sport. When that clip made the rounds online, you could feel the reaction go beyond Pittsburgh fans. People were watching this massive human being run with a kind of fluid power you do not usually see from someone built like him. Even the stiff arm wasn't just a stiff arm. It was the kind of moment where the defender probably needed a minute to collect himself afterward. And then the way Darnell stood over him, long enough to send a message, but not long enough to draw a flag, that felt like the exclamation point on a play that already said plenty. Now, the real question floating around this city is whether the coaches are going to fully recognize what's happening right in front of them. There are times in football when a player doesn't gradually rise. He erupts. And once that eruption starts, you ride it. You do not tiptoe around it. You do not ration snaps like they're gold bars. You go with the obvious. It feels like Washington has hit that point. Some fans might think that sounds exaggerated, but anyone paying attention knows it isn't. Yes, the Bengals' defense has been rough this season, but no defensive weakness gives you the ability to embarrass people the way he did. You cannot fake that level of physical dominance. The wild thing is that even before he touches a football, he stands out. When you see him off the field, you genuinely question if someone like that is supposed to exist. There are players who are taller and plenty who are heavier, but almost no one has his size without looking like they're lugging around extra weight. Washington looks like a creation built in a lab. Huge, proportioned perfectly, every bit of mass useful. And forget the official listing. Anyone around the team can tell you he hasn't been in the mid-260 range in ages. Players laugh about it because they know he's hovering much closer to that 300-pound mark. And somehow he carries it like it's easy. Once he's on the field, the size becomes only the opening act. What changes everything is what happens once the ball hits his hands. That was the biggest question in his first offseason here. Could he make that first move efficiently enough to become a real threat as a pass catcher? That was something he worked on endlessly with the staff, and you can see the results every single time he gets involved. There's smoothness now. There's purpose. There's that sudden shift from tower of a man to unstoppable downhill force with the ball secured. He does things that simply should not be possible for most players in this league. And that is saying a lot when you're talking about the National Football League, where the talent gap between the average player and the elite is usually razor thin. But Washington breaks that pattern. He blocks at a level that would make some tackles proud. And then as soon as he catches a pass, he stops being a tight end altogether. He starts sprinting through defenders who look like they're from a different weight class entirely. Watching him toss defenders aside made my mind jump back to those childhood moments reading comics where heroes face something way beyond their scale. It felt like that. A massive force towering over everyone else, barely noticing the attempts to slow him down. That's what it looked like at Acrisure Stadium as he stormed down the field. And when you have someone built like that, playing like that, you should not even need a debate about using him more often. Still, since somehow that debate keeps popping up, the numbers make the case on their own. Through 10 games, he has 18 receptions, a touch over 11 yards per catch, a couple hundred yards total, and 1 score. That is not enough for what he brings. Not even close. But then comes the stat that stops people in their tracks. When he plays at least 40 offensive snaps, not targets, just snaps, the Steelers have not lost. Not once since last season. Every time he's been on the field at that level, this team has run the ball well, found the end zone on the ground, and outscored opponents by a wide margin. Sure, there is always the conversation about correlation versus causation. But even with that in mind, the impact is too consistent to ignore. When he's out there, the offense looks heavier, tougher, more balanced, and far more likely to impose its will. So it becomes difficult to understand why a player like that would ever be anything less than heavily involved. You don't complicate something that works. You don't step around a weapon that makes the game easier for everyone around him. When Darnell is on the field, the quarterback has more time. The running backs have more lanes. Defenders hesitate simply because they know delivering a hit won't hurt him nearly as much as it's going to hurt them. You take advantage of that. You do not overthink it. And that conversation keeps circling back to Mason Rudolph, a name that somehow stays suspended between possibility and uncertainty no matter how long he's been around. It is wild how his career has played out, because every time he steps in, even after long stretches on the sideline, he reminds people that he can run an offense with poise. That performance against Cincinnati stirred up that whole debate again. He looked composed, balanced, calm in the pocket, delivering passes with a cleaner rhythm than many expected. It was not about the opponent. It was about the way he operated inside the structure of the playbook, the way he trusted the protection and made it look like the entire offense exhaled around him. There's always been this perception that he was stuck behind circumstances that had little to do with his actual play. Draft drama, timing, injuries, narratives that grew louder than his own opportunities, all of it played a part in blurring the real picture. When he came into the league, he walked straight into a storm of expectations and reactions he never asked for. Then came the concussion during his first real stretch as a starter, and everything after that turned into a long sequence of stops and starts where nothing lined up cleanly for him. It never felt like he had the chance to build momentum. And in football, momentum might be the most underrated ingredient of all. What makes his situation even more unusual is that he has spent years preparing, studying, absorbing game plans, and grinding through practices without the usual reward that other positions get. Quarterbacks do not rotate the way other players do. There is no practice squad for experienced passers. There is no minor league to keep timing sharp or decision-making fresh in a live situation. Once you fall into that second or third spot on the depth chart, you live in a kind of professional limbo where you must be fully ready for a job that might not come your way for months at a time. That is the frustrating reality for players like him and also for younger quarterbacks who need reps to grow. Will Howard, for example, find himself navigating that same impossible paradox. One minor injury during training camp can push him out of valuable snaps that cannot be made up. There is nowhere else to send a quarterback for live reps. There is no development league running the same playbooks and protections that could keep someone sharp while waiting for an opportunity. Everything happens inside the walls of practice fields, meetings, and film sessions, and that is where players are expected to evolve without the one thing that matters most: real game action. So when Rudolph finally stepped into the huddle again, after all that time preparing in silence, it was easy to see why so many fans immediately began asking why he was not considered more seriously as a starter. The traits were there. The confidence was there. The timing looked good. He made throws that required anticipation and touch, especially the ones layered over defenders into the soft spots of the zone. He took hits and stayed upright. He delivered the ball on time without drifting into pressure. He took command like someone who had been waiting to show the version of himself that does not usually get talked about. Yet every time this discussion resurfaces, it runs straight into the same wall, the same system that complicates everything. Quarterbacks develop best by playing, but the league offers almost no space for that. Teams cling to young players who need snaps, but those snaps never come unless an injury occurs or a season goes sideways. Veterans who are still improving get labeled as backups before they ever get a chance to prove something else. And then fans spend years wondering why certain players suddenly blossom after moving to a new team. It is not magic. It is opportunity. That is all it is. You see it across the league. Quarterbacks who were written off early find new life somewhere else because they finally get a long stretch of games without being yanked at the first mistake. A change in coaches, a fresh system, a new voice in their ear, a few weeks of confidence building starts, and suddenly they look like a completely different player. It has happened too many times to count. It is part of why dismissing Rudolph or anyone else in that room this early makes no sense. His career might still have another chapter waiting to open. Howard's career is just beginning. You do not close the book before the pages have a chance to turn. That is the challenge for the front office, as the offseason approaches. There will be talk about the draft, about incoming prospects, about which quarterbacks might be realistic options, and which ones are more fantasy than reality. Every year, fans get told a particular class is strong or weak, only for those predictions to fall apart once the players actually get into the league. No one really knows how any class will shake out until years down the line. What the Steelers do know is that they have two players already in the building who have shown intriguing flashes in very different ways. One is experienced, one is gifted and raw. Both deserve to be evaluated for who they are right now, not for whatever narrative was stuck to them at some earlier point. It becomes even harder to ignore when the team around them is shifting into a more physical identity. With Washington's rise, with the running game looking sturdier when he is involved, with the offense trending toward heavier formations and tougher matchups, a quarterback who can run the structure cleanly and keep the offense balanced becomes a real asset. Rudolph showed he could do that. Howard might show it once his time comes. The pathway is not as crowded as some might think, but the system must be willing to allow those opportunities instead of burying them under the weight of old assumptions. All of this leaves the team at a crossroads that is more intriguing than troubling. It is rare to have two quarterbacks who both offer potential for different reasons, especially in a league where most teams struggle to find even one. It is rare to have a tight and emerging as a force capable of changing how defenses line up before every snap. And it is rare to have these discussions happening in a season where the team is still finding ways to stay competitive despite all the turbulence and reshuffling. What comes next depends on who is given the chance to step forward and prove something new. The league rewards teams that recognize their own talent early instead of waiting for someone else to take advantage of it. The good teams trust what they see on tape, especially when it is staring them right in the face. And when you look around the league, the teams that break through are always the ones willing to trust their eyes instead of their fears. They're the ones who let young players grow by actually playing, who let quarterbacks compete instead of being boxed in by outdated assumptions. Pittsburgh is staring at one of those moments right now, with a tight end built like a myth and a quarterback who refuses to fade away. What happens next would depend entirely on whether the organization is ready to embrace that reality or let another opportunity slip through their fingers. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. The buzz around Pittsburgh grew louder overnight as murmurs leaked from team insiders suggesting the Steelers may have pulled off one of their boldest mid-season maneuvers in recent memory. According to whispers circling through front office hallways and locker room corners, the franchise has quietly secured a surprise reinforcement while simultaneously parting ways with a seasoned veteran whose presence once felt immovable. Nothing has been officially confirmed, but the atmosphere around the organization feels charged, as if everyone is waiting for the curtain to lift on a move no one saw coming. Observers close to the team describe the signing as unexpected but calculated, hinting at a player whose skill set fills a gap the staff has been monitoring for weeks. The acquisition reportedly arrived in Pittsburgh under the radar, slipping past cameras and curious eyes, fueling speculation that the front office wanted to maintain control of the narrative before the news inevitably breaks. Coaches have offered cryptic comments, neither denying nor confirming the development, while players have exchanged knowing smiles that only deepen the mystery. The other half of the rumor, the abrupt release of a respected veteran, has sent shockwaves through fan circles. This player, long considered a steady hand and a voice of experience, was believed to have solid footing within the roster. Yet insiders claim the decision was swift, even ruthless, hinting at shifting priorities and a desire to inject new energy into a unit that has shown signs of strain. Some within the organization reportedly felt the move was necessary to spark internal competition. Others are stunned by the willingness to cut ties with such an established presence. As speculation swirls, fans are left to piece together the fragments. A surprise newcomer, a veteran's unexpected exit, and a team that appears poised for a strategic shakeup. Whether this rumored overhaul becomes the spark that ignites a turnaround or the start of deeper turbulence remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. The Steelers' silence is only making the noise grow louder. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.